Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So without delay, let me start. Actually, this unit is prepared by Abhishek, who is here now. So since he's so busy, I could request him to give a class. So this is very important unit. In fact, all you know is about migration, is about politics also. Country's election is fought on migration. Uh, all these are very important, and we are experiencing this in India also, in outside during COVID time. So this is very important to understand how the migration governance is working. This is course 1, Migration and Diaspora Theory and Methodology, block 2, Politico-Economic Dimension, and the unit is Politics of Migration Governance. So our main objective of today's class is to understand what is migration governance, comprehend different instruments of migration regime, analyze the impact of politics on immigration and immigration, evaluate the challenges posed to migration governance. So this, as I mentioned, unless there is a proper migration governance, migrants will be very vulnerable, and what we talk about migration during development and all this will be highly challenged. So let me say what is migration governance. Migration governance, according to IOM, is a combined framework of legal norms, laws and regulations, policies and tradition, organizational structures at various levels, subnational, national, regional and international. The migrant process that shape and regulate states' approach with regard to migration in all its forms, addressing rights and responsibility and promoting international cooperation. When you talk about migration governance, it actually covers many things. In fact, it covers legal and law, policies and tradition. Tradition, again, you know, certain countries, they have tradition of not granting people to take citizens. They don't want to interact with, you know, like if you see German is a different tradition than UK, than GCC countries. So they have a cultural tradition which is actually also part of this governance. So it is a socio-economic, political, cultural, all combined. So when you go to other country, you can find how people behave and all. We sometimes feel that governance is the domain of government. It is not that simple actually. When migrants come to any country, there broadly they face challenges at various levels, at government policy level, local administration, national administration, local people, so many levels. So governance is a very broad way. You see all these are combined, which is called migration governance. So it also includes travel and temporary mobility, immigration, nationality, labor market, you know, host of other things. Very, very broadly, if you see. Industry, commerce, social cohesion, social services, health, education, law enforcement, foreign policy, trade, and humanitarian issues. Migration policy governance, when you talk, actually it includes large array of things. In fact, as all these are mentioned here, when anybody comes to your country, you cannot say we'll take their labor and you can just leave everything to them. They will be part of your society as long as they are here, and all other facilities, education, health service, that also linked to that. So overall migration governance includes all these aspects. Then over time, you see migration is increasing in number, though proportionately it is sometimes up and down, but number, absolute number is increasing. And that is why it is many countries are actually facing challenges of their demography, politics and all. So there is always a tension in many receiving country and sending countries. American elections are fought over, you know, uh, immigration issues. India is also Bangladesh and all this. So these are all contentious, very, uh, very challenging issues. And sometimes these issues actually change the politics, and people who parties who advocate this, they win sometimes. And across the Europe, we find now the parties who are advocating for anti-immigration policy, they are in power. Either they are in power or they are in the some deciding position. So this is very important, that politicization of migration has been increasing over the years. It can be observed in the formulation and implementation of immigration policies, border control, integration process, providing rights to refugee and asylum seeker, etc. So you can find, as I mentioned, in many countries, USA, you already witnessed, though Donald Trump lost the election, but it was a major campaign by him to build a border wall in the Mexico-United border, So this is one of his promise, and there are many people supporting that also. Okay, so those kind of very anti-immigration policies, narratives were developed not only in USA but across Europe. India's election on Bangladesh citizenship, even CA, and all these are entire European politics. Even today, there was very recently, 2018, there was a survey by YourGov. Huh? So this is a UK market-based research agency, and they have made a survey, and majorities of all 7 countries were opposed to accepting more migrants. These countries include Germany, 72%, highest number in fact, then Denmark, 65%, Finland, 64%, Sweden, 60%, UK, 58%, France, 58%, Norway, 52%. So people are overwhelmingly, actually they are opposed to have more number of immigrants. As you all know, if you see the demography, I spoke in my last 1 or 2 talks that many countries are undergoing demographic change, where they are actually afraid of their future in politics, in cultural terms, in economic terms also in some countries, though presently migrants are contributing main way their country's economy. America, UK, and Australia, all these countries are actually, if they don't accept migrants, their economy will go down. But at the same time, they are also apprehensive about their future demographic issues, where they will become minority, many of the white population. So this is a reality, but we cannot avoid. So these are all tension between economy one side and politics on the other side. Economy is consumption, profit and all, which is driven by that. Production, consumption, profit and all. But politics is driven by many other things. It is driven by fear also, fear of losing their majority. It's driven by cultural challenges, it's driven by many other factors. So these politics sometimes superseding the economic need, and that is happening Europe, Asia also many countries, but mostly we see the global north where countries are developed. You can see the statistics of how people don't like to accept many immigrants. Then there are also contests for anti-immigration, like there are huge, in that anti-immigration also majorly started with 9/11. in USA, that bombing of the Twin Tower. And then UK European crisis in 2015, where a refugee from number of refugees from Middle East and Africa making dangerous trip to Europe and many deaths en route. You have seen many photos of ship boats are drowning in the sea, and all the people dying there, and so many incidents. People, because they cannot enter to other country through formal channel on road and uh, by air. So they took sea routes and very dangerous route to enter. So all these were we witnessed during Syria, conflict and all. Then high levels of unemployment also. Many of these countries' economies, the GDP, the growth rate is down, and many industries are almost saturated, so they don't absorb many new employment, and you don't find many new enterprise, and leading to high level of unemployment, especially among the native people, because they are not very competent compared to global migrant workforce, high skilled workforce. So there is a economic side also for that, why people are opposing. Even in India also you find many places people are opposed to migrant labor because they take less money and work very much more. So immigrant laborers in many countries are like that. There is a perception that they take away the job of native people and they do more work for less money. So all these are actually creating lots of challenges, and the perception is anti-immigration. Then there is also cultural challenge, like many of these migrants, they are because of the low education or cultural identity, which they don't interact, assimilate with European population. So there is apprehension that these people are not to be trusted. When you see the cricket match in UK, India and England playing, Indian people will be clapping. Same with Pakistan, African countries. So the perception is these people cannot be trusted. They are not nationalistic. They are not assimilated with our own culture. So these are all, there is a perception, and that's why many political parties, especially the right-wing parties, they took that as an opportunity and made that as election campaign, and also foreign government in many countries like Australia, Denmark, Italy, Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Slovakia, and all the major factor in Swedish, German, and French politics. So these are major election issues, and parties also came in power through anti-immigration campaign. So these are all context. You can see what impacted the migration governance in that country, immigration policy in that country. All these are very much important to know. Then intricacies of policies on migrants. So migration, as you know, migrants are not citizens of the host country. In many countries, it takes time to get citizenship. But past 10 years, 15 years, or sometimes throughout their state, they cannot get citizenship. So that is one issue. They cannot legally find any ways to support their case, and many things are very intricate in that way. They are not present in home country. Neither they are present in home country from where they can take support. Okay. Neither they are citizen of host country nor they are present in the home country. They are mobile. There are very sizable number of migrants. They don't stay in one country. They work somewhere 6 months, somewhere 2 years. They migrate to another country. So there is no consistency actually how to deal with them. Then there are national policies doesn't work for them, as They are not citizen of host country. Therefore, there is a need for global cooperation between countries through bilateral and multilateral mechanism. So we know migrants are moving from one country to another country, and they're always on move, and there is no particular law you find governing them because they're not citizen also. So that is a challenge also. That's why there is a need for more understanding how to manage, govern this mobile population. Okay, who are economically very important, who are also citizen of some country, though not host country. So these are all human. In fact, migrants are all human. We have to think that way and think some mechanism where through cooperation, bilateral and multilateral cooperation, we can facilitate that because this is the globalized world and this is happening all the time in human history. So that's why this, we have been familiar now very well. Global Compact for Migration. This is a, very overarching, um, governance governance mechanism where almost 185 countries they agreed to part of this GCM, and now it is happening. Just 1 month back there was IMR, all, and lots of debate is going on how to adopt this GCM, though it is not binding, but it is very important. Global Compact for Migration to address some of these issues of migrant at the global level. Then, migration governance principles and objectives. International Organization for Migration, IOM, mentioned migration governance framework comprises 3 principles and 3 objectives to implement human, orderly, and well-managed migration policies for states. What are those 3 principles and 3 objectives? The 3 principles are adherence to international standards and the fulfillment of migrants' rights. For migrant rights, for safety, physical integrity, well-being of and dignity must be preserved. This is the first principle. Second principle is evidence and whole government approaches to migration governance. You all know what is whole government approach. I'll take a pause. What is whole government approach? Manish? Okay, anybody else? Yes, Iram? I think you have a poor network. Harjinder?
Sir, can you repeat? There is some audible disturbance in.
Okay.
I'm not clear about the question.
What is whole government approach?
Whole government approach, sir. Sorry, sir, I'm not clear on this concept.
Okay. No, I just asked.
Sir, can I say?
Yes, please.
So this is Abha. I think
sir.
the whole government approach is that all the departments which are involved in the welfare of the society would work together in convergence for the betterment of the people concerned, either the targeted group or the targeted sector.
So very much. I think Manish is running by train, so no problem. So this is what Abha told perfectly. It applies to whole government.
No, sir, I am present, sir.
No problem. You carry on in case you are traveling. Don't worry. Okay. So whole government, when you talk about any issue, entire government, starting from home department to education department, healthcare, every department they cooperate and they provide solution to that. Similar to what I had mentioned already. So it is a responsibility of all departments to deal with, because migration, as I mentioned, migrant is not a single that only Ministry of Education or Home Ministry will deal with. Healthcare is important because they will be working in all departments also. Migrant can work in any sectors, any department. So we need to have whole government approach. Then third one is strong partnership. You during COVID time, this is the many places government failed actually, and this is the civil society which actually took lead, and many times private sector also. So we need to see time to time there will be lots of challenge. So partnerships are very important. So to deal with migration, like diaspora organization, in collaboration with the host country and home countries, and then coordinate. Like during Gulf, recent COVID-19, even during Gulf War, it was civil society which coordinated with the government, and facilitated how people can come, return to their mother country safely. So these are very important. We see partnership because partnership like civil society and all, they are very much linked with the grassroots level, and people know them, and that's why they can sometimes very well manage. And it is important that we should promote partnership. Then three objectives are socio-economic well-being of migrants and society. One objective in this, it proposes to promote stability, education and unemployment and employment opportunity, and reducing the drivers of forced migration, including by promoting resilience. In fact, forced migration is also important challenge. So this objective is saying we should actually for long-term, long-term betterment of society and migrant, we need to have we need to promote socio-economic well-being of migrants and ultimately society. Then second objective is effective responses to the mobility dimension of crisis. Every crisis has a mobility side, Even COVID-19 we witness disease doesn't travel, but people travel through people, disease travel through people. So mobility, even you see last 20 years, many of these viruses, disease and all, they came through migration, and people are the carrier actually. So when you deal with this kind of thing, you have to see the crisis, effective responses to crisis rather than targeting the disease, you target the migrant. That is not a good way to handle. So sometimes we have to deal with. Nowadays, everything is globalized, not just disease and education also globalized. Anything, if you see the crops also, paddy or anything, crops are also globalized. You innovate somewhere and bring some more hybrid, high productive, yielding, crops, and it will become marketable everywhere, and they are also globalized. So everything is globalized. You have to think how to deal with that effectively and how to respond in a very coordinated manner with preparedness. So these are all very important, and we should be very human, not that because migrants are carrying some disease, we should not target. It happened during COVID-19. Many countries didn't allow the ship to embark in their place because they found that they can spread the COVID-19. Thailand, it happened. Many countries, the ships were stranded. So this is what is very inhuman response to deal with migrants. Okay, so we have to be very careful. Then safe, orderly, and dignified pathways of migration. This is also very important. States' overall approach towards migration management is assessed broadly, including border control, enforcement policies, criteria for admission of migrants, resilience and preparedness, human trafficking, smuggling of migrants, and integration of returning citizens. We have to take a whole range of things to manage migration properly. safe, orderly. We have witnessed many times people going by a container vehicle and dying all inside due to lack of oxygen. It happened from Mexico to USA. One container, everybody died, and many of them are Indians. So these kind of, if we don't have, good migration governance, this happened. People go in smuggling path, through smuggling path, and they take risk of their life. So we need to manage, do border control, but at the same time deal the migrant in a very human manner. So migration governance index is another area we have to understand to know what is migration governance. 5 important policy domains to define a well-managed migration policy. One is institutional capacity, second is migrant rights, third is safe orderly migration, fourth is labor migration management, fifth is regional and international cooperation and other partnerships. Let us go one by one. Institutional framework, institutional capacity. It includes institutional framework, migration strategy, legal framework, institutional transparency and coherence, data gathering and information mobility, all available. You all know if there is any crisis in any country, where you go, if there is a wage theft, you have to have a legal system to address that. If there is a evacuation, you need to know how many people are there in that country. You need to know the data, where they're staying and all. So even to bring back the citizens, migrants to your home country, you need to have all this. Otherwise, migration governance will fail. So institutional capacity to have all this, dealing with migrants is very important. All these 5 points are very important. Then migrants' rights, it includes access to basic social services and social security, family rights, right to work, long-term residency and path to citizenship. So unless people, why they go to some country and some country welcome like Australia and Canada, people go against some of the order and people may not get work immediately. They may get work which are not at their level, but they go because there is a future in that country. So migrants prefer these countries. They will have their own right to work, they will have their family rights and all this. So these are very important. Access to basic service and social security. So if you compare Gulf versus USA, though USA is very restrictive of taking migrant, they only select high-skilled migrant. But once you go there, UK, even Europe and USA, you get better social security, even in Canada and Australia. That's why many people prefer that. And unfortunately, not many will be high-skilled, so they go to GCC countries. So many aspect, people prefer all this. Then safe orderly migration, safe and orderly migration. This includes border control and enforcement, because smuggling is not a good for migrant or the host country or home country. Only some middlemen they make benefit, and this is also subject to, if you are caught, you will be returned back, deported and all this. So this is not a solution. So that's why border control and enforcement is very important to stop trafficking. And trafficking, it can be very vulnerable for migrant also. Then admission and eligibility criteria. They should impose admission and eligibility criteria. Reintegration policies, measure to combat human trafficking and smuggling. So these are very important to have a safe and orderly migration. Then labor migration management. This also includes labor, skill qualification, recognition schemes, student migration regulation, bilateral labor agreements, migrant remittance. So these are all very important when you talk about labor migration management. Some countries, they have a long experience and they manage very well how to manage their labor force, how to manage the remittance. We talk about Philippines, which actually have very good management, how to use the remittance, how to prepare a global workforce, considering the demand and supply, how to uh, provide them proper training and awareness. All these are very important for labor migration management. Then regional and international cooperation and other partnership. As I mentioned, there are, I'll be talking about so many, conventions also after this. So these are all signature and ratification of international conventions, regional cooperation, bilateral agreements, global cooperation, other partnership. Through this process, you find lots of agreement, cooperation, and all this to facilitate safe and orderly migration. Then let's talk about global migration regime. I think by now you have got some idea what is migration governance and how it works, what are the challenges. Let's talk about global migration regime. There are six major, migration regime. I'll be talking one by one. One is related to refugee, another related to migrant workers, smuggling and trafficking related, internal displacement, institutions related to which kind of institution will be dealing with this. Then sixth is migration and sustainable development agenda. When you talk about migration regime, actually regime is a kind of, uh, kind of overall, ecosystem, you can say. As I mentioned, some kind of, sometime you find lots of restriction across the globe, and you know the restrictions because of those. But when you talk about migration regime, these six are very important to understand. Let's go one by one. Refugee, with regards to refugee, 1951 Refugee Convention. This is one of the most important legal document governing laws relating to refugee in most part of the world. It is a multilateral treaty ratified by at least 145 states. People living outside their home countries who are unable or willing to return home country because of well-founded fear of persecution are defined as refugee. We all know in India also Tibetan community, Rohingyas, and the Afghani communities, they are there in Delhi and elsewhere also. So we call them as refugee because they are not welcome in their home countries, because home countries, the politics have changed. Like Tibet is occupied by China, like Afghanistan, the regime changes. The Rohingyas are persecuted by Myanmar. So these are the situations where they cannot go safely. So they are accepted as refugee within India. So these are the, community are very vulnerable. Neither they can go to their home country nor to other country also so easily. So they surrender, means we call, they just staying here without any certainty about their future. So these are refugees. We have to think some special way to deal with this community. The convention has prescribed the definition of a refugee, rights of displaced, and legal obligation of states to protect them. Because refugee is a multilateral subject. They are coming from one country to another, and if no country care them, they'll be like they'll die also. So this is the situation for them. Principle of in the 1951 Refugee Convention, there are three major principles. One is non-discrimination, second is non-penalization, third is non-refoulement. When you talk about non-discrimination, always there is discrimination within country also. But with regards to refugee community, they get bigger challenge because migrants within country, discrimination they can deal with legal ways. Okay, they will have state government support them or whatever, they can get some support. But refugees are once they're discriminated, their life is more vulnerable. So this Refugee Convention 1951 talked about not to discriminate any community with regard to their age, disability, country of origin, race, religion, sexuality, and other grounds. There are some countries, they actually accept some kinds of refugee, belong to some religion, not to other, belong to some ideology, not others. It happened in America also. During Cuba's revolution, those are opposed to communist regime that time, they were prosecuted and they came as refugee to USA and they are accepted. Whereas USA will not accept the communist people in same way. Okay, so this is the thing in terms of you have to see in terms of ideology, religion, and many other. Okay, Manish, you want to raise any question?
Yes, sir. Sir, but India is not a party to Refugee Convention, 1951 or 67 protocol.
Okay, no, I didn't talk about that. I'm talking there are 150, 45 countries already signatory. India is not, but India's policy towards refugee, it is hosting 15 refugee communities, almost 15 refugee communities, Armenian, Tibetan, Rohingyas, Bangladeshis, Afghanis. So it has its own uh, it has its own legal and way to deal with refugee community. So these are the things. So
India is not signatory to all these conventions. Generally, India doesn't welcome refugees like Rohingyas. We have clear-cut policy.
no, that's what I told now. Discrimination or whatever acceptability depends upon countries to country. They accept some group, not to other group. Tibetans are welcome. They are settled everywhere. In Orissa, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, everywhere. Okay, in Himachal. So certain communities they welcome. Some communities are not welcome. There are many issues. I am not going to that. Okay.
Sir, one example I would like to give that recently when in Europe, basically in Poland, the people from say Africa or Pakistan, those countries when they went there, they put the wire along the border and they did not allow to come in. But when the Russia attacked Ukraine, because of the cultural aspect, because Ukrainians are more of a European nature. So
that is what I'm saying. This migration governance, you see, there are issues of xenophobia, issues of assimilation. Yes, Manish. Manish. Okay. There is. I think your audio is breaking. So, Manish, you can write in the chat box if you want. Okay. Acha, no, your voice is breaking.
Yeah, that's true because I'm telling that.
Okay, so we'll have discussion once we get better network. Otherwise, you write in the chat box. Acha, another Manish is there. Manish PC. I got confused actually. Manish?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Sir, so since India don't have a rigid policy on this refugees, kind of discriminatory, and some people are criminalized, some are given all the rights or at least partial rights. So it's a confusing thing, sir, actually. Where do we stand on refugees?
That is what I tell you, the deep-rooted, perception for different refugee communities. They are in every society. So India is not an exception. And government has to follow that. Like when it comes to Tibetan, they are very much integrated to India because of Buddhism and all. They are part of overall, cultural system. So we accept them. There are some community who are quite, we cannot, they may be perceived as future challenge. So we don't accept them. Government policy also. a little bit, different towards them. So these are so many
Okay.
socio-political, cultural challenges. That's what I told. Migration governance is not only economic or political oriented. It is cultural and so many other factors are there. I mentioned the governance. And this refugee also is a very significant number. Some country has so many refugees. Okay. 1967 protocol relating to the status of refugee. This protocol removed the limitation of the 1951 Refugee Convention, which has limited itself to Europe in terms of area and pre-1951 in terms of years. 1967 protocol can be seen as the only amendment to the 1951 Refugee Convention. So it encompasses some reforms it brought where some limitations were addressed. Okay. Migrant workers. Second one is migrant workers. So what we'll do, let me complete this entire thing. We can, in between, you can ask also question, but let me also proceed. Almost we completed, yes, more than 45 minutes. Then migrant worker. This is related to, there are many, conventions like ILO Migration and Employment Convention, which is revived again. Okay. So member countries need to provide information related to national policies on immigration and information concerning to the condition of work and livelihood of the migrants to the International Labour Organization whenever requested. So ILO is maintaining all our global statistics on labor. So all these signatory countries who are under ILO, they have some obligation to give this kind of information. Okay. Then ILO Convention concerning to migration is migration in abusive condition and the promotion of equality of opportunity and the treatment of migrant workers. 1975. This is another, okay, which actually takes into account how to minimize the discrimination, how to provide equal opportunity to the migrant workers. We all know decent work of ILO, so this applies to the migrant workers also. In 1990s International Convention on Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Families. This is another convention which not just protect the right of the migrant but their family also. Then third one is smuggling and trafficking. It has one protocol called Palermo Protocol. This protocol talks about prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in person, especially women and children. That is in 2000. Okay, so especially in terms of trafficking, so this is a very important convention. Okay, protocol against smuggling and of the migrant by land, sea, and air. 2000. So this is another protocol to stop this smuggling and trafficking. Then internal displacement. This is another area actually which not only leads to internal migration but international migration also in some cases. So the guiding principle of internal displacement have been formulated through resolution in 1997 on internally displaced person. They are applicable to the different phases of displacement, providing protection against arbitrary displacement, access to protection, and assistance during displacement, and guarantees during the return and alternative settlement and reintegration. If you see country level displacement, there are some continental level, displacement also. When the big projects like Suez Canal, you can see, there Panama Canal, these are cutting across countries. So we find huge displacement, So those kind of displacement, there should be some kinds of principle to how to rehabilitate them, how to protect them and all. This is related to that. Then there are institutions like which are the institutions which actually act to make migration governance very safe and orderly. One such institution, including ILO and all, even all UN organizations also involved, but there are top organizations which actually like United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee is directly related to uh, refugee, IOM also migrant, International Organization for Migration, then United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. So these are some UN organizations which are dealing with the migration and promoting safe migration and governance. Then sixth is migration in sustainable development agenda. As you all know, 2030 agenda for sustainable development target 10.7 is talking about migration. Though it is not very much, many scholars say migration is not too much highlighted in this sustainable development agenda. But still, whatever way, this is a very important component to achieve the sustainable goals. So this is in this target number 10.7. You can go details, but today will be just confining here because you have other things. Then level of governance. When you talk about level of governance, you have to see how particular type of migration is governed. Okay. When you talk about refugees are always out of means between countries or between many countries. You talk about Syrian refugee, you talk about Bangladeshi refugee, Rohingyas, Afghanis. They just don't come from Afghanistan to India. They go from Afghanistan to many countries. So it is a multilateral subject. Many countries have to see how safely, how properly they can manage to rehabilitate the refugee. So it is not just between two countries, many countries. So this is a global issue. Irregular and low skilled. This is a regional area mostly between countries because low skilled people, what it means irregular migrant, they maximum go from one country to another. Then high skilled also, as I mentioned, low skilled, they can go within the country, they can go to within the continent, within the ASEAN and all, like Indian people from Bangladesh, Pakistan, they're going to GCC. So it is between the broad Asian context. Then high skilled migrant is also an important area of bilateral dealing. Sometimes it is unilateral also. Any country may stop some year employment, somewhere they may accept, like it happened many times in Germany and USA. Certain year they have quota, H1B visa quota they have for skilled labor. So they sometimes they reduce, they increase, and this is their decision. We cannot, other country cannot have a say in that because it is their economic requirement. It is sometimes unilateral, sometimes bilateral. So that is what different types of migration. It's, how the governance level you can see. Then challenges to migration governance. As I mentioned, there are many challenges, but some of the challenges are identified here. Perceived erosion of national sovereignty. In fact, this is a fear applicable to all countries. It is happening out of that. You see the government is changing in Europe and many countries out of fear that immigrants can take over our power. And this is what sometimes they think it can challenge our sovereignty. As the number grows, they may be, it happened in cases of Sri Lanka where LTT issue, then some countries, their migrants become outnumbered, and this, so there is some kinds of evidence also, and that's why this kind of issues are coming, that migrant can challenge the national sovereignty. Then negative public perception of migration. So migrations, like as I mentioned earlier, they perceived as they're taking away the job, they're taking away their privileges, they're burden on the resources of the country. So all this can, change the perception of the public, and that can work against the migrants, and it impact the policy also. Then lack of international cooperation. It is very much evident in time of war, disease like COVID-19. You find international cooperation is completely collapsing because many countries unilaterally they take decision to throw away the migrants. All this happened. Then institutional apathy. When you talk about many institutions, they don't bother about how to, humanitarian way they deal with migrants. Okay. I'll give the example already I gave COVID-19 pandemic and migration governance. In fact, when COVID-19 came, there was worldwide apprehension that UN system collapsed. Not just WHO was criticized, but every UN organization was highly criticized, and people are questioning whether they are relevant or not. America also questioning, many countries are questioning uh, whether UN agency, public also questioning. So this was the challenge, great challenge posed by COVID-19. So then you find lots of unilateral decision. Migrants were scapegoat both in sending and receiving countries. When migrants came from many countries to India, they're kind of they are not even hotels in Delhi and others. Same with other country also. But migrants were targeted actually. Overnight they became hero to zero billion. So this is what happened during COVID-19 time. And there are other issues also. It was such a abrupt and unforeseen challenge. Many institutions are not prepared how to deal with this issue. So there was a complete breakdown for some time. So this migration governance is, when you think about it, is a very multi-dimensional issue and very complex issue. That's why it is that every whole of government and whole of society approach is required to deal with migration government. When you talk about whole of government, all department putting across, government sectors. Whole of society means every civil society, cultural, political, all organizations should also cooperate. So then we can, reduce the xenophobia, reduce the targeting migrants, making migrant vulnerable, and finally we can manage migration. And as you call, migration is very much important for global progress, GDP, country's progress, progress of the migrant family, and all this. We need to think of a very multi-dimensional, multi-sectoral and global approach. Then only we can succeed in providing some solution to migration governance. There are also references you can go through, like Great A, post-migration and global politics, another global governance of migration and the role of trans-regionalism, Busati M, the migration governance framework, defining, measuring SDG target 10.7. So these are some, but in the unit you will find many other books. You can read them for better knowledge. Okay, I'll stop here. I think Manish has another question. You can go ahead.
No, sir, no question.
Okay. So my point is, this unit is very important actually. Today we talk about GCM, Global Migration, Global Compact for Migration. We talk about SDG. We talk about many issues related to migrant, and especially when you think of future, many challenges will come demographically, Also, lots of politics is changing over time. Right? Best, right in politics, migrants are challenged everywhere. So it's a very complex thing emerging. So we need to know how migration governance is working, what are their challenges, what is the future. So all these are very important. Okay, I'll stop here. Harjinder, any question?
Sir, I have a question about the migration governance in the context of India. As far as the data is concerned on migration, the data of World Bank indicate that we are the number one country who receive the remittances. And on the number of migrants, the emigration, the migrant workers going out for India to do work, we are at the second number. But as far as the migration governance is concerned, I think this is a very lacking area. The migration governance is not very good in case of India. Even we don't have a robust data source about the number of migrants, that how many workers are in which country belongs to India. Even we don't have the data about the student migration, which is also a emerging case in case of India to migration. Uh, Sir, how can we, what type of policies, or I think there should be a need to of a unique institution in India to deal with the migration under the External Affair Ministry to
See,
deal with all these issues.
these were evolving issues. In fact, sometimes back there was a special ministry called Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs that is no more there. But institutions come up with new challenges. Okay, and India has lots of issues, but it also dealing with huge number of migrants. It itself is a very challenge. So that's why I already mentioned partnership and all. Which government is not the only source. So far as data is concerned, okay, government can should provide all data, so that data are very much important for any other policy, any other kind of migration governance. So that is one aspect, but it is not only government. It is a societal approach is also important, and also at various level migrant, the recruiter themselves, we see the why you don't have data, because there are many ways people are going out through smuggling channels, so many other ways. So we cannot have data also. So we have to see how borders are shaped. Okay, so many issues we cannot deal with in a single answer. So these
Sir,
are
I think national government is also not responsible for this. If we
this
taking
is a
the
huge
case of
challenge.
Kerala, then Kerala have a very good data source about their migrants, and they have a think tanks like Irudhya Rajan who are doing continuously working on the migration issues. But in case of another states, they are very problematic data sets, and even not any rigorous studies on the migration are there in case of other states.
No, we need to through this program also, we should sensitize people, sensitize all, as more and more people, have knowledge about them. Many people, we in India also don't know how many people are going abroad. How to the history of our own diaspora. Many people don't know. So as we know, and as we know the importance of migration, at every level, government level, civil society organization, slowly things will improve. So this is a huge tax actually. Some states, because of their experience for last 40 years or 50 years, Kerala, you are giving example, every family is affected. So they have some kinds of experience over the period, and they over time they made this actually. What we see today, Kerala is very systematic in terms of data gathering, managing migration. It evolved over time, which other states are experiencing very recently. So I hope that will be, over time, people will also realize the importance of migration. and accept, some kinds of lesson from they should learn from Kerala, from Philippines, from other countries who are dealing with migration. Even managing migration, we need to learn many things from other country, because for example, I tell you the migration of female. Though it is a old phenomenon, but the migration of independent younger female as going independently is a very recent one. Okay, so Philippines has a long history, Kerala has a long history, so others should learn also from them how they are managing and all. We cannot simply act based on some kind of without data and without experience. We have to see how best practices are available elsewhere. So this is a very complex issue. I think as we explore other units, we'll know how migration governance is so complex and critical, and how it is happening across the globe. We'll certainly will deal with this kind of issues. Okay. Any
Hello,
other?
sir.
Bas.
Manish here, sir.
Manish.
Sir, many of our migration problems are rooted in British Raj, I think, like undivided India. Many like Pakistan refugees or Pakistani migrants to India, or the Chakma people from Bangladesh. Then this plantation workers of Sri Lanka. All these are rooted to the British Raj in India, and the like diaspora communities of Suriname, Mauritius, Fiji. All these have some connection with the British government. We didn't mention it anywhere, I think, the course.
No, we have, if you go through our program schedule, you can find some program, you find all these are
Yes.
covered. Indenture
Okay,
labor is covered, all this, Sri Lanka also part of indenture, Mauritius and Suriname, all these are there. Okay. So all these are there, but so to know everything detail, we have to expand also the program. But I agree with you, many
yes.
of these those kind of that like Pakistan, India, Chakmas in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, these are all partly British responsible. But it is a always it is there, this migration, refugee. Even today, after British left, you find some of the other Bangladesh also came, Rohingya also came, Tibetan also came,
Yes,
Afghani
sir.
also came. So it is an ongoing, issue all the time throughout the human history. So now problem rises not to find what British did, but find the solution in the present time. Okay. So we have to see how the British, we cannot, even though you blame them, it cannot give any solution. We have to deal with the current problem. Okay. So that's why all bilateral, multilateral, all this should be very strengthened, and see to that migration is a safe, orderly thing. Okay. So I'll stop here, and only thing I want to know whether you are